Go.
Welcome to COVID313 Coalition for Families and Students. We're here with you again, another week, I think week like 85. And it is a pleasure to be back again. I'm Christine Bell. I am honored to serve as the Executive Director of Urban Neighborhood Initiatives and a really proud partner of this coalition. We have a really great show for you today. And you're going to hear in the background my daughter, and she just got back from preschool, and there was some very exciting things that happened today. But we all, just as a reminder, we want to hear from you. This is not a one-way conversation. We want to hear your comments, your questions, and so you can ask your questions using the Facebook chat. We have moderators that are waiting for you, Lindsay and Michael and Brooke are all waiting to hear from you. And let's just make sure that they're paying attention. And why don't you let us know how you heard about the town hall today and where you might be joining us from today. Like always, we're translating the town hall to Spanish and ASL. So we do want to give folks time to get on the right line and get comfortable. We have Christina with us today, who is going to give us details on how to listen to Spanish interpretation. Christina?
Good afternoon. Buenas tardes. Si quieren escuchar en español, estamos en vivo. El link está en el chat o pueden ir a Urban Neighborhood Initiatives en su página de Facebook.
And we also have ASL interpretation. We have Laura and Marilyn with us today, and we're so grateful for you being here with us today. Laura and Marilyn will be your ASL interpreters. We will be interpreting on the screen throughout the webinar. They will also be recording this video with closed captioning for later viewing. And then Laura, is there any instructions that you want to give in terms of pinning your box on Zoom?
Just the other interpreter, Marilyn, and I will be switching back about every 15 minutes. So if you want to pin both of us to your screen, that might be the easiest way to do it because there are two of us.
Great. Thank you so much, Laura. And thank you, Marilyn, for being with us today. We have a really wonderful group of experts with us today. We're going to hear from the Student Advocacy Center. We are going to hear about elections and not only the process, because you can still register to vote. We're also going to get to hear a little bit about what's on the ballot. And what I am really looking forward to is hearing about Halloween and how in the time of COVID, we continue to keep our children safe. So it's a really exciting hour that we have planned for you today. Just a reminder to our experts, please remember to speak slowly for our translators. They really want to make sure that they're translating the important information that you're sharing correctly. Also, if you're not speaking, please turn off your camera so that we can ensure that the ASL interpreters can be seen. Remember to mute yourself when you're not speaking. We have the most amazing timekeeper in all of the land, Mr. Terry Whitfield, and he will be communicating with you via chat. So he'll let you know how much time you have remaining. So keep your eye on your chat. And if you go over your time, myself or Rajeshri will come onto the screen and gently remind you to wrap it up. And so with that, I'd like to introduce Perry Stone Palmquist. And Perry, I hope that I got the last part of your last name correct. And if I didn't, please correct me. But Perry is from the Student Advocacy Center, and we'd like to welcome her to the town hall today. Hi, Perry.
Hi, you got it perfect.
I did?
Yes,
I've really been working on my my phonetics.
Yeah, we didn't make it easy with that last name, so thank you.
You're welcome. All right, go ahead.
Yeah, are you going to ask me questions or can I just go for it?
Well, you can, what would you prefer? I have a set of questions for you, but if you want to quickly give an introduction to who is the Student Advocacy Center, some of our viewers might not know who you are, and then we'll go through the questions.
Yeah, either way, I have I spent some time reflecting about these questions, so sure. So Perry, I'm Perry, Executive Director of the Student Advocacy Center, where we believe education is a right and every child's worthy of a quality education. We have offices in Detroit, Ypsilanti, and Jackson, and we get calls from all over the state with our statewide helpline. So anyone can call us throughout the state if their family is facing some kind of education crisis, whether that's school discipline, which we're talking about today, special education, or some other barrier to school enrollment or success. And we also provide one-on-one education advocacy in those 3 communities and mentoring, where we work with youth more intensely. So excited to talk to you today about where we're at, where we've been, where we're going with school discipline.
Awesome. Okay. So one of the first questions we have is, and so we understand we're actually in a really interesting time. And I don't know, Perry, in the work that you've been doing, if you saw what we've seen in our schools, an increase in fights, an increase in really troubling conflict resolution that leads to, suspension and expulsion. And so I think that one of the things that we're curious about is what are students getting pushed out for at school right now in this very interesting, dynamic that we've got.
Yeah, and I think
going back to school face to face.
Sure. Yeah, I think I want to lift up that we are in quite challenging times, and we see adults struggling, right? Like getting into fights at airports, road rage, screaming at school board meetings. And so it's really no surprise that our young people who are struggling, especially after having one of their most important support systems ripped out from under them for a year and a half, like, right? We would expect that because behavior is communication. And I think in this moment, we have this unfortunate confluence of schools are short-staffed, adults are in crisis, and then we have kids coming back after having very little structure or social interaction. And so anxieties are kind of high across the board. And so we are seeing a lot of those behaviors that you already mentioned, and a particularly harsh reaction to some of those behaviors. So both of those things. And there isn't data, of course, it's been released particularly right now, but in terms of what we're seeing in our helpline, I will say we've been quite surprised. We were expecting things to be challenging, but we weren't quite prepared for it to happen so early. I don't think we've ever seen this number of expulsions and long-term suspensions so early in the year across the whole state. But when I look back at sort of what's the data, and I look just at Wayne County, and it's pretty reflective of what you see statewide. So looking back at 18-19, and I think this is what we're probably going to keep seeing. For expulsions in Wayne County, almost half of those were for other. We don't know what that means. So that's much higher than what we see statewide, which is more like 35 to 43%. This is only for expulsion, so 60 days or over removals, right? Physical violence without injury was about 18% of Wayne County expulsions that year. And that's kind of tracked, I think, over time. And that's a little bit higher again than statewide. Physical violence with an injury was only 13%, which is about what we see statewide, 10 to 13%. 9% of expulsions were for drugs, which thankfully is much lower because we've been seeing a lot of cases for vaping all around the state, which is weird to like putting kids up for expulsion for vaping. And statewide, that number is quite higher, has been historically like almost 20% of students. And then firearms is still something that's going on. So 10% of cases in Wayne County are being expelled. And then for longer term removals or suspensions, exactly what you're saying, fighting, aggressive behavior, even swearing, we're seeing students being suspended for some of those reasons.
Wow. And Perry, I appreciate you framing it in the way that you did around how adults are feeling and the anxiety that we're all feeling, and the reminder that we're the role models, and so that it's actually not surprising that we have young people behaving in the same way, and that it's also an incredibly stressful time, I think, for all of us. And it sounds like it's manifesting. Do you have any sense, maybe anecdotally, of what is considered other? No?
Well, I imagine it could be things like aggressive behavior. Like I'm trying to think of some of the other categories and what's excluded, but it maybe could be aggressive behavior. Yeah, I don't, because the other categories really cover that. And so I know when we look at research, academic research on school discipline, often when you see other, that is reasons that students of color in particular get removed. And I didn't do that deep a dive analysis locally to see if that's the case. I'm not sure I can even do that with the data that's publicly available, but kind of historically research that it's white students tend to get removed for very specific, like they bring a gun or whatever, but this nebulous other category is disproportionately put to students of color, which is quite troubling. So yeah.
Well, I think that leads in really nicely with the next question around what racial disparities are you seeing in the state and Metro Detroit on suspension rates? And then if you can sort of specifically delineate, what you're seeing.
Yeah, and I will say, unfortunately, in our state, despite years and years and years and years of advocacy from many folks asking for more transparency around suspension data, specifically, we don't have easily accessible, publicly available data for suspensions for general education and special education students. That said, looking at the expulsion data and the long-term, so the 60 days and up, which is publicly available, there is disproportionate removals of boys, of students with disabilities, and Black students. And so that has, there's been a couple years of data, maybe more than that's finally been made available for those long-term removals. And that's what we're seeing, which completely aligns with, again, the academic research that's looked at these sorts of things over the last 20 years. This is a perpetual problem in our state, and it's directly impacting certain populations of students more than others. And I should add, the research that really dug into this showed that that's not because there's disproportionate behavior, right? That there's actually some bias in this system, and that's important. So sometimes people use that as evidence. Well, these are students who are misbehaving more frequently, and that's not what the research has borne out.
So I want to go to a question. I think it's appropriate to say, particularly, we have a lot of folks that view this, that their family members, their children fall into those categories. So what kind of advocacy can they do for their students, and what resources are available? And then I will go back to some more general questions, but it feels like a good time to say, like, how do you make sure that doesn't happen to your child?
Yeah, it's so important. I want to mention a couple things, and hopefully we'll have a chance to get to some of the examples of things that are going on that are good, because I think then parents can use those as examples when they're advocating. But every student has the right to have, the school should be considering 7 factors before they suspend any student. So even a 1-day suspension, but certainly if we're getting into longer. And one of those factors is considering an alternative to suspension. And so the state law is really clear that removal is quite damaging, and we should be looking at alternatives. And so rather than having families memorize those 7 factors, we say, ask your school when this happens. Again, maybe not for a 1-day suspension, but if we're talking about multiple days, hey, can you walk me through your 7-factor analysis? Can you tell me what alternatives you considered? Because I have some ideas. And I think if we start having a movement of parents really asking those questions, that's going to build more of a culture of accountability around those laws, which I think would be great. So that's one thing. 2, when students are facing long-term removal, over 10 days, or their kids getting suspended over and over again. So we're talking about 10, 20, 30, 40 days over the course of a couple of months, which is criminal in my opinion. I really want them to reach out to the Student Advocacy Center because I don't think that's something that a family should have to go through alone. And families feel such shame about this, and we don't want them to feel shame. We want them to be empowered and to know what their rights are. And so they can call our helpline at 734-482-0489. We'll do our best to get back to you as soon as possible. There's so many people calling us, but we will, or you can email us at helpline@studentadvocacycenter.org. And then the third thing quickly I'll mention is that we are working with 482 Forward and others on a set of bills. We call them the expulsion prevention bills, and they would establish an appeal process beyond the school district for the first time and do other exciting things. So we really need to raise our voices collectively and ask the education committees in the Senate and the House to give these bills a hearing. So please connect with us on Facebook or whatever if you want to learn a little bit more about these bills and advocate for them.
So you said, let's talk about the examples. Like, what are some of the examples? Just, I feel like I'm really curious. What are some of the examples that you have seen that have worked with those 7 elements? And also, could you speak a little bit about why we have this sort of restorative practice training that has been done, but are we seeing that actually being utilized? And then if you can talk about what you just said, you'd hope you could talk about around.
Yeah.
Around what are some of the examples of what has worked?
A lot of people ask, like, why is this persisting and why does this keep happening? And I'm probably the wrong person to answer that because, but with that said, I have talked to a lot of administrators about this. And I think on the one hand, again, there are situations where districts are deeply short-staffed and stressed, and restorative practices, if done well, requires time. So does suspending kids a lot over and over again. That also requires time. It's a different kind of time. And it also requires adults to be transparent and vulnerable. So we know we need to take care of our educators so that they can care for our youth, even on their bad days. And we need to fight for more resources for our schools. So that's for sure. And we know that there's more to it than that. And I have seen schools that are also struggling with resources commit to doing things differently, right? So they reject our society's punishment mindset. They understand that behavior is communication and that many of the students that are acting out are impacted by trauma, disability, adverse childhood experiences, a bad morning, and they do all sorts of things, really powerful things, proactively and reactively, right? So they have community circles where they give students a voice to build the culture. Some of them are doing it every morning, some are doing it Mondays and Fridays, but they really ask the students to co-develop, and this can be done in elementary school, middle school, high school, to really co-develop community guidelines. And if a problem emerges in their classroom or in their school, they're tackling it together. And they're really uplifting student voice. They're giving lots of opportunities for full body movement. We know that if you have trauma or even toxic stress, this is for adults too, by the way, you need to move your body if you have been stressed. You need a place to get that out. Just sitting there and thinking about it or talking about it is inadequate. So we need full body movement. And all of a sudden in middle school, you stop having any movement. So we wonder why behavior escalates in middle school, all sorts of reasons. One of it is the lack of movement. Giving students voice and choice, knowing a student's name and what they like and calling them by their name and telling them that you care about them and this is a safe place sounds really easy, but so important. Having chill out spaces in your classroom and in your school, a place where a student can go to self-regulate, partnering with community agencies, and working hard to pick high quality evidence-based curriculum and really working to make your class as engaging and supportive as possible. And then when all that stuff has happened, still stuff's going to happen, right? Still a student's going to act out, perhaps. And these schools that have really proactively thought through, we do have a tool on our website that they can use that was developed with school districts. What are your lesser interventions that you're going to use as a school? So maybe that student needs a check-in, check-out system every day. That works great for drugs, for weapons, for kids have been bullied and then are acting out because of that bullying. Check in, check out. maybe preferential seating, maybe scheduled breaks throughout the day. Maybe they need a group support or some sort of social skills training. I think after the year and a half we just had, maybe all of us need some social skill training and some practice and role play.
100%.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yes, yes. So those are just a few, but even having a caring adult, so many of our youth don't feel like they have a safe person in their school to go to if they're having a hard time. So those are just a few of the things that we have seen consistently work in these sorts of situations.
And parents can advocate for those things, right? So I think I just want to circle back to what you said, is that the parents that are listening, these are things you could ask for, and maybe suggest to the school to try, or if you're using those techniques at home, maybe even suggesting that to the school, like, this is what has worked at home. Could we try it in your classroom, or in the school in general? So I just want to circle back to that. I know that Rajeshri has at least one question, and we're at about, this went really quickly actually, and such good information. So Rajeshri, do you want to pop on here and ask your question?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for being here today. It's been really interesting and enlightening to hear some of what you shared. And actually, after I ask my question, I think I'd love to hear a little bit more. So one of the things we're seeing, and I work directly with schools and school leaders, and you kind of alluded to it, but one of the things we're seeing is that everyone is stretched extremely thin right now. So you've got schools that are understaffed, you've got principals that are teaching classes, which means that maybe discipline is not getting its fair shake. So some of what you're describing and what we're seeing in schools is kind of unsurprising, and no fault of the kids. It's just a function of like the reality of what's happening. You're in a lot of schools and you kind of have seen, if you had to give advice to school leaders, what would you say? Like, fix this first, right? And that might have sort of lasting impact and help, get things a little straighter along the way that can be better for kids and better for the schools.
That's a great question. And I want to first say, I'm not a school administrator, and I want to say that's one of the hardest jobs there are, and they have my respect. And I try to encourage those folks in my life who are school administrators and say, I'm always thinking about you. How can we bring more resources in? So community agencies can really do a lot to just support those leaders in this hard time. But a lot of times what I would suggest and what I've seen other administrators do is, like, we need to slow down a little bit. And I had heard that was the intent, right? When we came into the school year, let's not pack in the academics and pack in, but we need to slow down a minute and really allow some time to build relationships. And so I always say this, it's great if you want to do restorative practices reactively. I would much rather you start doing it proactively, where you're really just starting a practice. Start it on Monday mornings if you can't do it every day, or start it for one class period where you're really giving, because restorative practices is inherent. Every student will have an equal voice. The teacher has an equal voice because everyone's going around and having a chance to share. And so I think doing that sort of a thing to start to build the culture. And then when problems pop up, you have that culture there. You have that practice built in. Hey, I'm noticing that we're starting to have a lot of talking in between things, or I'm starting to see that there's some tensions, or I'm hearing some things that there's some fights going on. Let's talk about that. And then you sort of have that built in as a way to problem solve. That's not going to help things alone, right? But I do think it starts to build that culture of care, student voice, and problem solving.
Yeah, that's great advice. I mean, and you're right. As I've been working with school leaders, that's been my sort of conversation with them too, is, you're sort of the lead everything for your building, right? And if you teach a class, as an example, then you are not there for all of your students and all of your teachers, and that has like lasting impact. So really think carefully about what's the highest and best use of your time, right? Because if you have a teacher might be, principal might say, well, I got to take care of the second grade class. Okay, so the second grade class is now taken care of, but the first, third, fifth, etc., has now been left on their own. And that's what I'm seeing, is that's when a lot of problems are happening, where teachers don't have the tools, don't have the patience, don't have the strength, don't have whatever, And you're sort of resorting to some of these, where kids are taking the brunt of it. And kids are struggling too, as we talked about. So, I feel like everybody's, the gas is low in the tank for everyone. And so what do we need to do to sort of conserve energy so that we can, again, focus and prioritize on our students. And so, I think another thing parents can do in general is, as you said, kind of really be aware of what's happening in the schools. This is a great time, if you're feeling comfortable with it, to volunteer. And, a parent, even if it's not in your class, and another adult in the room can do wonders sometimes to diffuse the situation. So, it's tough, but it's kind of an all hands on deck right now. Switching gears a little bit to expulsion decisions and the sort of 7 factors. Having worked with boards that are facing that, I've heard really great conversations about how to do that. When you have worked with parents, what are some of the main ways that schools have avoided expulsion, and what role have parents played in that process?
Well, that's a little hard to answer, I suppose, because when people come to us, it's often because they're about to go to an expulsion hearing.
Well, yeah, I'm sorry. I meant in those once they get to the hearing. Yeah. Like, what are some suggestions?
Yeah, and I think what we always try to do, so often what we see happening is that schools actually just have it like a checklist, and they don't even talk about it with the family, which is some of the things we're trying to get fixed in these bills that are proposed. But we really believe the family, the student, should have an active voice in some of these, and how these factors play out, especially restorative practices and a loss intervention, because students themselves have many great ideas if you give them the space to reflect on what is something that they could do to repair the harm, what is something that would really get to the root of the problem. And so that's really what we bring to the table when we come, is we've already had like hours and hours of conversations with the student and parent, and so that they come to the hearing and really participate and share their thoughts. And so they actually are talked about. And we usually have a pretty good idea of what would, I've never seen a 180-day expulsion particularly help any situation, not even a 60-day. And so to me, there's always a lesser intervention, fewer days out, those things that I mentioned before, those check-in, check-outs. We've seen sometimes community service has sometimes worked depending on the family. But it's really, we talk about guidelines to sort of creating those lesser interventions, and student voice is where it starts. So I really think it's important to really solicit those ideas from the families themselves and the students themselves before just deciding on what it should be, right?
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rajeshri. Perry, it is wonderful to have you here. Will you remind people one more time where they can find the information on the new bills that you and 482 Forward are working on? Because I think those are incredibly important as we go forward. And then also, can you share your helpline again?
Yeah, I think I'll share our website address, because that has a lot of that information on there and how to reach us. So www.studentadvocacycenter.org. And then our helpline phone number is 734-482-0489, and look forward to connecting with folks. Thank you.
So hopefully the moderators, you've got that. You're dropping it into the Facebook chat so that people can access the Student Advocacy Center. And Perry, so grateful for the work that you do for students.
Grateful for you.
Yeah, so grateful. And I think, I think this is all hands on deck. And I think you raised something that we all need to think about is how can we play a role in both reducing our own anxiety, but also really supporting our young people and the people that are interacting with them, so that we can get through this. It almost feels like we're going through another, not a pandemic, but it does. It feels like we're in this like very strange stage of the pandemic where we really need each other, maybe more than we even needed each other before. So thank you so much for the work that you do. Thank you for being here with us. I think we'll probably have you back again so that we can talk more about how we support students in schools and support the great work that the Student Advocacy Center does every day. So thank you very much. And I think Rajeshri, if you'll come back on, because we have some really wonderful folks to talk with us about Halloween.
Awesome.
And yeah, so I'll let you introduce those folks and take it away.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So we're going to talk about health and Halloween, which are two words that don't always go together. But if I could invite Dr. Cunningham and Tanea to join me. Hello, everyone. Nice to see you both. We're in the middle, almost towards the end of October, and coming up soon is one of our, kids anyways, favorite holidays, which is Halloween. Before we start talking about Halloween, I wanted to share some data for you from last year. So when I show you these numbers, this is from 2020. So it says October, November, but obviously we haven't gotten to November yet. So it's from 2020. And the reason I want to share this is I want to talk about the impact of Halloween on spread. And so this is data from last year that shows sort of the rise in the number of cases throughout the state, from October 1 to the middle of November. And what I want to point out is Halloween comes right in here, right? And so as we go past Halloween, we see the numbers sort of really rise. And if I had a line chart, you'd see that. The one that I have is got a lot of information. So this, I think, shares the information, says it more clearly. But we can see cases, going up, doubling almost, and in some cases more, in those couple of weeks after Halloween. And not just Halloween the day, but Halloween the season, because we know that Halloween parties and Halloween outings and Halloween gatherings and trunk or treats kind of go beyond just the 31st. So I wanted to frame our conversation with that as our beginning sort of, starting point to really talk about Halloween and what exactly, how as parents do we manage the Halloween season while also keeping our kids safe. So, Dr. Cunningham, maybe I'll start with you. And maybe you can talk a little bit about how do we keep our kids safe and what's safe to do this Halloween season?
Right. Well, I have to put myself in the camp of people who really enjoy Halloween. The decorations are up outside my house. Both my teenagers are excited and thinking about what they want to be. Around the time of Halloween and Halloween season, typically the weather does start changing. More rain, it gets cooler, so people tend to be indoors more. And we do know that when you're indoors without wearing masks, there's more of a risk of spreading COVID. The outside trick-or-treating, I think, is relatively safe. People aren't really all that close together as they're going house to house. So that makes me a little more comfortable. I would be a little more hesitant to do indoor events. I certainly would not go to an indoor haunted house as much as I like them. I just don't want to be in close proximity of a lot of people. Parties, I would probably go more on the smaller side than being at big parties or things like that, but people can do it safely.
Thanks, Dr. Cunningham. Nurse Tanea, what's your thought on Halloween?
Well, us at the Detroit Health Department, we have plenty to go around of information. I can start off with data because that's always most important. If you want me to share my screen, the data right now, and I got up some pretty nice slides so we can give a picture of what we should look at here for the city of Detroit. So for the city of Detroit, I'm pulling up my screen right now and also starting with data, of course. So the city of Detroit, as of the 10/18, over 59,000 confirmed positive cases. We can look over at our screen and look at the percentages. Detroit right now is still moderately low at 4%. Yay, keep wearing your mask, keep doing what you're doing. Michigan, 11% as a whole. We still have 45.9% of Detroit vaccinated, and that's at least with one dose. So that's always good. And because of this Delta variant, which is over 99% of the positive rates that we're seeing right now, which is more contagious and it's hitting our children, the guidelines for the city of Detroit, if you look at this colorful graph here, we kind of put it in risk factors. So if we look at the low risk recommended, celebrate outdoors, like Dr. Cunningham mentioned. Pumpkin decorating or carving is always good. Decorate the outside of your home, like Dr. Cunningham mentioned. How about a Halloween scavenger hunt? I don't know about you, but I love scavenger hunts. I would totally love to play. Hold a Halloween contest, virtual, of course. Watch a scary Halloween movie, that moderately for the children. Let's not scare them to death. Trick or treat, scavenger hunt inside your home for the kids that live in the home. Moderate risk, grab and go goodie bags. That's always good. Make sure you put a table for those that are passing out so you can safely pass out the candy, and put distance in between you and those that are coming to your residence. Outdoor costume parties. How about hosting an outdoor Halloween movie night? Projectors are really good on the side of your home. Always remember, no matter what, wear a mask. Practice social distancing, hand hygiene. That's always number one. Halloween safety tips. Number one, wear a mask. Trick or treat in small groups outdoors if you're going outdoors. Washing your hands before eating any of the candy. Of course, it's beautiful. We love it. I can't wait. But washing your hand sanitizer. And then tip number 4, if you're able to get vaccinated as an adult, a child 12 and up as of right now, please get vaccinated. Halloween safety tip number 5, track local information, data information, which that's what I love to give. And you can find that information on detroitmi.gov. And Registry, I'll let you ask whatever other questions you have. I don't want to take up all this time because I always have so much information.
Great, I appreciate that. So let's talk a little bit about, and I don't know if you can maybe stop the share of your slide so we could get everybody back on screen. That would be great. So that's really helpful, helpful information. And I think this idea of incorporating a mask, which is kind of funny because Halloween costumes have masks, but I had to explain to my daughter last year the difference between the mask she was wearing and the mask that we needed her to wear. So that was a good teachable moment for us. So let's talk a little bit about, excuse me, you know, Dr. Cunningham, right now, as the season changes, as you mentioned, what else are we seeing in kids? What, you know, we've talked a lot about COVID, but what other sort of viral infections and things are we seeing in kids, and how do parents kind of stay on alert and keep them healthy?
So one is RSV, respiratory syncytial virus. We're certainly seeing that at high levels across the state and across the country. Most people, it's a cold. Kids, especially under 2 years of age, can have a lot of trouble breathing and wind up in the hospital. We also now have influenza in the Detroit area and other parts of the state. So along with getting your child vaccinated, if they're old enough for COVID, I'm a big believer of flu vaccines, which I recommend to all my patients. Flu vaccines are for anyone 6 months of age and older, so that's certainly something there. A lot of the things we do to prevent COVID are going to prevent flu. They're going to prevent RSV, avoiding large groups, wearing a mask, especially indoors. I don't want to get into any politics. I'm just here for the science. And the science says if you're wearing masks indoors, you're safer. And CDC recommends that areas of the country with high transmission wear a mask indoors. I can tell you that Wayne County, Macomb, Oakland, Jackson, all of them are actually the whole state's at the very highest category. So I think that's important. And if you have a sick child, keep them home. The last thing we want to do is transmit it to the teachers and others. And even if other kids don't get really sick, I worry they're going to bring it home to grandma, grandpa, or other adults who are at really high risk for complications.
I think that's good advice. And this idea of kids being sick, especially on Halloween, right? We might say, well, they're outside, let's let them go. I think you're absolutely right. When kids are sick, we have to be very diligent as parents and keep them home. So that might mean going to the store and buying them their own big bag of candy, since they may not be able to go get their own. But the idea here is it's important every year, but especially right now, to make sure that we're keeping everybody safe. Another quick health question, Dr. Cunningham, that's come up is the impact of sugar on kids, right? And specifically the immune system. Is there a connection? Should we be limiting the amount of sugar kids take right now as an effort to promote wellness?
So the sugar is not going to make your immune system weaker or hurt it, but what it will do is increase our waistline. And we know we have an obesity epidemic in this country, including in children. So I am not heartless. I'm not saying don't have any candy, but I don't want to see kids eating half a bag of candy one night. Have a few pieces. It's Halloween. I get it. I'm not going to object. I just don't want to see them eating tons of stuff, especially the pure sugar stuff that's just going to rot their teeth as well. So brush your teeth. Everything should be in moderation.
Okay, that's great. I noticed, excuse me, Tanea, when you were presenting your slides that you defined a traditional trick-or-treating as somewhat of a high risk, right? And we heard Dr. Cunningham say, well, if you do it, safely. So there's, and you, in your subsequent slides, you talked about how to safely do it. Could you just kind of outline some strategies you would suggest for those of us passing out candy on what we can do to do our part to keep people safe?
So thank you for that great question. A good thing to do passing out candy is to use a table to separate you from those that are coming to your residence. Another good thing, have hand sanitizer just maybe on your table. Also, put those candies, if you can spare, putting them in goodie bags, or just putting the bowl out and having it already in the bowl the kids can come and grab. And that's why it's important for after trick-or-treating, after or in the midst of trick-or-treating, the parents utilize hand sanitizer, and when they get home, wash those hands, because they've touched so many packages, they've touched so many goodie bags and all that good stuff. Let's wash our hands before we take in that sugar.
I also like to set myself outside on the porch or the driveway, and you can still have that table there, but I like having a couple chairs. If it's cool, I'll have a little bit, maybe a little fire pit out there, a little small mobile one. But I think, again, outdoors is safer than having people come in your house.
Right.
And those are all great tips you just shared. Agree 100%.
Thank you. That was supposed to be outside. I'm sorry.
I figured.
So my 6-year-old is going to thank you, because you might have just saved Halloween for her. I was not big on letting her go out this year, but you all have reassured me that there is a safe way to do this. So she'll send you a little thank you note at some point.
And along with this, it's not just the COVID and the viruses. I don't want people to forget about the usual safety things. Anything that hides the kids' vision or impairs their vision, I worry about them tripping. Kids get so excited, they want to run house to house. You still have to watch out for the cars. You still have to watch out for wet leaves and being able to trip on them. So I'm glad we're paying attention to the infectious stuff, but we also still need to have that common sense parenting where we put the throttle on and just get their energy down slightly so that they're safe. And again, I like when they were little, my kids are teenagers now, I used to walk with them a few feet behind, so I knew they were safe. And I enjoyed seeing everyone out there as well.
Yeah, I think that's an important point too, right? If we're accompanying our kids, whether we wear a costume or not, if we're going to be around people, either keep our distance or wear a mask ourselves if we're going to get up close. I mean, because it's been a while since we've seen neighbors. This might be an opportunity. So just kind of being prepared makes a lot of sense. I'm going to switch us to vaccines now. Hearing a lot about boosters. Tanea, can you just give us a sort of quick update on where we are with boosters, the 3 different, formulas, the Pfizer, Moderna, Johnson & Johnson, who can get a booster? Just give me a quick snapshot of where we are.
Okay, thank you. For Johnson & Johnson, we're still waiting. It looks like there's data maybe where if you've gotten Johnson & Johnson, you may be able to mix to get a booster, Moderna or Pfizer. That's still on the table. It hasn't been approved yet. It's just on the table. As far as Moderna, right now, Moderna is the third dose is for those that are immunocompromised only. What's on the table is FDA is fully approving those that may have maybe 65 and older, maybe healthcare workers or out in the front line, our residents, our restaurants, and those that are teachers, those that are working with our everyday public. Those that may have underlying health issues like diabetes, high blood pressure, those are the ones we're waiting on to say, hey, you can go ahead and get your booster. But right now, just immunocompromised. Pfizer, bring it on. I'm going to say that. Immunocompromised, 65 and over, healthcare, public workers, anyone dealing with the public right now.
Come
Go
on,
for it.
come all. Got it.
Third and booster.
Awesome. Dr. Cunningham, where are we on kid vaccines?
I believe the FDA is going to meet next week to talk about the Pfizer vaccine for children as young as 5 years of age. Once the FDA does, if they do approve it, it then goes to the CDC on November 2nd and 3rd. The CDC has a panel of experts, usually academic physicians who are independent, called the Advisory Panel on Immunization Practices, Advisory Committee. And this Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, after they vote, it is an official recommendation, and that's when we start giving everything out. So I would expect by mid-November at the very latest, we're going to be able to give these vaccines. It's going to take a little time for healthcare systems to change our computer programs to do this. The mixing and matching, if that gets approved by CDC, is also going to be a challenge. It's not insurmountable, but your healthcare professionals are going to need a little bit of time to ramp up everything. We're starting to work on it, but until I have that final CDC recommendation, I can't put anything into place.
Great.
But it's coming.
Okay, and will there potentially be a Moderna and a Johnson & Johnson for kids? I mean, I've heard about Pfizer, but what about the other two?
Moderna has data on kids. I think they submitted it to FDA, but it's not quite ready for the FDA panel to review yet. Johnson & Johnson, I have not seen the pediatric data yet. I'm sure they will at some point. I just haven't seen it.
Okay, great.
But quite honestly, I don't care what vaccine people get. They're all effective. Whichever one you can get is the one I recommend.
Wonderful. Well, we appreciate both of your being here today. Thank you as always. Enjoy your Halloween celebrations if we don't see you before then, and don't eat too much candy. But thanks for being here, and I'm going to pass it back to Christine for the next session. Thanks.
Thank you.
Take care.
What great information about Halloween. So it makes me feel a lot better about going out with my kids. So up next, we are going to talk about elections. And so I'd like to welcome Melanie McElroy. And so I think
Melanie's actually, I'm going to be filling in for her. I'm Isra Duraisa. Hi.
Isra, thank you.
We're running another election protection training at the same time. Sorry.
I understand that it's amazing that you all are here. So you're from Michigan Voices. And so we appreciate very much that you're here with us today. So can you share with us how you register to vote and the absenteeism process?
Yes. And if you don't mind, I'm going to go over just like a general overview too. And then I can also put some links in the chat for how folks can access registering to vote.
Awesome. Thanks.
Absentee ballots. Yeah, no problem. So hi, everyone. Peace. My name is Isra and I go by she, her. First, I'm going to talk to you about the michigan.gov/vote website. We have an amazing Secretary of State right now, and the website is super user friendly. And if you go to this website, you can also find resources in Spanish, Arabic, and I believe it's 18 other languages. So it's also super accessible for folks that are English is their second language, and so forth. There you can also find the link to register to vote. You can find the link to request an absentee ballot application. And I'll also still drop it in the chat in a little bit after I'm done talking so that you can quickly do it. Other things that you can do at the michigan.gov/vote website is, and I'm so sorry if I'm going too fast for the interpreter, you can let me know.
You might want to slow down just a little bit. It's okay.
I
We've got
tend to
some
do.
time. So Marilyn, and I'm sure Christina's tongue is like twisting right now. So yeah, if you could just slow down a little bit, it's okay. Go ahead.
Sorry about that.
Okay.
So at the michigan.gov/vote website, you can also even check if you're registered to vote. So some folks maybe don't remember, but a few years back registered with another organization. You can check that. You can then find your polling place. You can also find your local clerk. You can request, like I said, the absentee ballot. You can find a secure drop box as well if you use an absentee ballot method to vote, which is just where you can easily and conveniently drop it off if you don't want to go in person to the city clerk to drop it off. And then you can also, which is really, really cool in my opinion, see your sample ballot. Sometimes it's not always there until closer to the election, but you can actually see what your ballot's gonna look like, which helps if you're trying to research names and you really don't wanna go based on name recognition, which we highly don't recommend. Do your research and make sure that you vote for the person that best aligns with your values. And so again, michigan.gov/vote, super great resource. And then in regards to who can vote, this might be elementary for folks, but I just want to go over it. It's any US citizen that's 18 years or older on election day. So a lot of times if you have young kids or students, they can register if they're 17, but will be 18 on election day. Also, something that many people don't know is in Michigan, thankfully, anyone with a felony record, anyone that's in jail awaiting trial and has not been convicted of anything can vote absentee in jail, and also can vote any way they want if they're out and about but have a felony record. A lot of times people are misled and think they can't vote if they have any of these things going on. So you can be on probation, you can be on parole, you can still vote. It's not common knowledge. So a lot of times if you do know someone who's awaiting trial and is in jail, letting them know to request an absentee ballot is cool. Also another thing that people don't know is you don't need a driver's license to vote. If you, for whatever reason, forgot your ID at home and it's like 7:30 and you need to vote at the polling location, you can sign an affidavit and still be able to vote. It's really important to remember that it's an affidavit because many times poll workers, without ill intention, just maybe give you a provisional ballot, which we don't recommend you complete because it almost doesn't count. And so you have a right to vote a regular ballot if you sign an affidavit proving that you are who you say you are. So just remember that. Again, because this is a municipal election on November 2nd, if there's not going to be huge lines, unfortunately, we'd like there to be more people, but there's not going to be as long of lines, so you shouldn't have any issues. The busiest times are when they first open at 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. The polls close at 8 p.m. But anyone, if they're there in line at 7:59, is able to vote. So don't be discouraged if you do get there last minute. I'm a procrastinator, so I would be the person there at 7:50. But thankfully, because Prop 3 passed in 2018, you are able to vote at any point at your city clerk's office, absentee voting, at a satellite location. The cool thing about Detroit is they have several satellite locations. You can vote at one if you're registered to vote at any point up until Monday before the election. On Tuesday, only the people that are not registered to vote can vote at a satellite location. But otherwise, you may go there to do whatever you need to do. Let me just look at my notes real quick. Absentee ballots, another thing. So let's say you requested an absentee ballot a long time ago and you still haven't received it. I would go to either your city clerk office or in person or a satellite location, and they can literally give you the ballot right there and then. You could either take it home with you and submit it back, or you can vote right there and give it to them. And then another thing that people forget is if you're on the automatic absentee voter roll and list, you do not get a ballot every election. What you may get is an application to get a ballot. And a lot of times people ask us that. They're like, oh, I didn't get my ballot. No, just because you're on the list, you're just going to get an application. So you have to apply every time in order to get your absentee ballot. Again, if you're not registered to vote, no problem. You can still visit your local city or township clerk office and get registered to vote any day leading up to and on election day. Remember that you have to, if you do that, you have to bring you have to bring a proof of residency. So that could be a bill, it could be a bank statement, anything that has your name and your address on it. And last but not least, what we've seen, again, because it's a municipal election, might not be as crazy. However, if you feel like you've been wronged, or you know someone who maybe has had an issue at the polling location, or there's language barriers, or there's a couple things that can happen. I'll drop the resources in here as well. There's a number that's 1-866-OUR-VOTE. It's a national hotline. It also offers different languages for folks to choose from, but it is ran by the National Lawyers Committee, and they are on standby for any of the questions that you may have. Another thing is our Michigan Voice team is going to be in our office also, having folks on the ground in Detroit, Dearborn, and Hamtramck. So we'll be visiting just to make sure everything is running smoothly. Sometimes we notice if a polling location has changed spaces, even if it's like a quarter of a mile away, most people get confused and just don't vote. And so we try to make sure that we have signs that let people know that. But again, call that number if you run into any issues. And then there's an incident report form I'm also going to drop in here. If you run into issues and you just don't want to call the number and you just want to fill it out, you can fill it out on your behalf, or you can fill it out on behalf of someone else. And you can say the issue has not been resolved. I'd like someone to call me or assist me at this location. We have volunteer attorneys on the ground on election day to help us out. I think that covers everything. I know it was a lot, and I tend to go into the weeds sometimes, but I'll also drop all of the links that I just mentioned. And yeah, let me know if you have any questions. Thank you so much for giving me the time.
Thank you so much. That was a lot of information, and thank you for the links so that folks can go back and look at them. And I'd love to invite Olivia Lewis to come back on. She is from Bridge Magazine.
Hi, I'm here.
Hi, Olivia.
Sorry.
It's okay. I figured you know, we're coming up against the 1 o'clock hour. So if you could talk about the proposals, and I'd love to invite you back next week to do a deeper dive into the proposals, since we're at end time. But I would like could you just talk a little bit about what are the proposals on the ballot? And then I'd love for you to come back next week so we can do a deeper dive into those.
Sure. Yeah, I'll just be very brief and quick. There are 3 proposals on the ballot this year that people need to know about. Prop E, which is about entheogenic plants, necessarily like shrooms, and making them a lower priority for policing in terms of decriminalizing shrooms if you have them on your person or if you've taken them. Prop R, which would be creating a reparations task force, and they would be making recommendations to City Council. And then the big one is Prop S, which is really about citizen control over creating appropriations through City Council so that they can then determine where money is going. And so those are the 3 big ones. And I'd love to come back next week and really talk about what those mean, and also as well as what else is on the ballot, because there's a lot happening this year.
We know that there is, and so so consider it done. Olivia will be here next week to talk and do a deeper dive into each of these really important proposals, and making sure that our viewers have the information that they need to make an informed choice as it relates to the ballots. So it is 1:01. Thank you, Olivia, for going so quickly, and thank you, Ezra. Is it Ezra? I'm sorry, I feel like I just...
Ezra, it's okay.
Okay, thank you so much for being here. The information that you gave is so important. So we have a few announcements before we pop off. Chaz has in honor of DV Awareness Month, They will have a trunk or treat on October 30th. And then we have the flyers for those. So if we could share those, a trunk or treat October 30th. Also on October 30th, there will be a trunk or treat and a variety of other activities at urban neighborhood initiatives. And Wayne Health will be there with flu shots and vaccines and COVID testing. So come on out for our trunk or treat, and get your flu shot or your vaccine or get COVID tested, and have fun in our haunted house. And then also we can't forget to talk about Halloween in the D. So there are a variety of sites across the city that are doing, Tanya, they're doing trunk or treats, right? Oh, and candy giveaways, is that correct?
We are doing, basically that's what we're doing at the sites. We'll have a big table at all of our police precincts, the fire station, Adam Butzel, Farwell, Patton Recreation Center. They'll be out there and more. So if you see anyone at all of these precincts and fire stations, come and enjoy the fun. Halloween in the D is really big this year. Thank
Great.
you.
No, thank you. Okay, so you've got lots of options related to Halloween. The last announcement is Detroit Public Television has coming up the future of work. And they're hosting a virtual town hall on the future of work next Wednesday at 12:30 p.m. It will be probing into the task of creating quality jobs to rebuild the middle class, which has seen its economic prospects erode in recent decades. So if you want to join in on that discussion, go to One Detroit Facebook page. And what an incredibly important and timely conversation to have. Thank you all for being with us today. We're 4 minutes over. I apologize for that. There was just really such amazing information. We'll see you next week. Have a wonderful rest of your week. We'll see y'all next week. Stay healthy. Get vaccinated.